Okay, so if any of you have any questions, please drop into the chat box. And okay, I think we are good to go. So hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us at GenChat series. And this is Kitana here from GenLab. So we will be starting with our first morning segment, that's an intergenerational dialogue with our speakers, Professor Thang and Anne with us here today. So Prof. Thang, just a introduction, she's a cultural anthropologist with research interests in aging, intergenerational approaches, family and migration with a focus on Asia. So, and we are happy to also have Anne, who is a trained counselor and had been an advisor for student welfare and pastoral care during her teaching years. She has been also conducting courses on parenting, strengthening relationships, emotional wholeness, and is also a grandmother of 5 lovely grandchildren. So welcome both, and thank you so much for being with us here today at this dialogue segment. So through this dialogue, we hope to dive into the theme of intergenerational bonding and raise awareness and the value add of intergen bonding and its benefits. So why is it so important to communicate with someone from a different generation, and why? So perhaps could I start inviting Prof. Thang and Anne to briefly share about yourself to our audience here with us today, please? And perhaps a few liners about why do you think intergenerational bonding is an important issue? Yeah, maybe may I invite Prof. Thang first to share?
Hello, hi, good morning. I'm Leng here. To introduce myself first, right? So I think Katana has introduced about my interests in issues, research relating to aging, to intergenerational approaches and so forth. So mainly, I think I got interested or realized that aging is something that we should be concerned with when I was in university, where my grandfather had a fall at home and had to go to a nursing home because we couldn't have the capacity to have him take care of him at home. And that was when I realized that there's actually issues about aging, because in a nursing home I see there's so many older people. So that's how the whole interest started, and that was like 30 years ago. And then I was studying Japan, so my interest and my research became focused on Japan as an aging society. So looking back, I think it was a good move, because Japan and Singapore is 30 years apart. So when I started studying Japan, like say in 1990, the whole Japan started to talk about aging society, aging issues, and Singapore, didn't really care about it. But moving on, what we see now in Singapore is what had happened in Japan. So I think that for somebody, a Japan anthropologist like me, it really have a lot of implications for my own country as well, when I look at how Japan has developed today in terms of the whole critical issues that's developing in Japan. Yeah, so in the question of why I think intergenerational bonding is important, is because I do believe that society is made up of all generations. It's very easy for a generation and think, hey, I only have friends of my generation and that's enough. But that's not enough, because we really have to look into how we can mutually care for each other, connect with each other, so that we can leverage on each other's strength to move on. And I think one very important thing is to really see older persons as social capital in society as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, can I hear from Prof. Anne?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Okay, thanks to Katana and the team in GenLab for giving me this opportunity to share on intergenerational bonding. What this group of young adults is doing through GenLab is very commendable, and their objectives resonate with me. It is something that has been in my heart for a long time. I do agree with Prof that this is something very important. Okay, but most of my sharing this morning will be from my own observation and experience as a mother and a grandmother. I stay in a 3-generation family with my son and grandchildren, and also because of as a teacher and teacher counselor in a JC before. So that is more an experience that I had. I have learned that intergenerational bonding starts with learning to listen. Whichever generation we are in, we need to listen. We have, always people say we have only one mouth and two ears. Okay, we need to listen to each other, accept one another, respect each other, and recognize our strengths and weaknesses. This will be a start of the proper kind of communication that we can have with the other generation. All right. I will leave maybe these points that I've just mentioned for further dialogue later on. Okay. Thank you and have a good morning.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anne and Prof. Thang, for sharing more about yourself and your interests. So if I may start to share some brief context about intergenerational bonding based on what I know or what we do at GenLab, I'm sure all of us in this room, we also know that it refers to bonding across generations, and the common picture that comes to our mind is like a young person interacting or working on a project, for instance, with a senior. And we also know that despite efforts and measures to bridge gaps, for example, like we have events like Grandparents' Day or encouraging children to volunteer with seniors, there continue to be generation gaps, especially with the aging population. So, for example, the proportion of Singaporean households comprising only of older members have increased in the recent years, which naturally implies that less younger members are living together with their grandparents. So this naturally means that, or it seems to imply that the young are connecting less with the older generation. So just wondering if this is the main reason, or are there other reasons or root causes behind why do generation gaps exist? Maybe I wanted to hear from Anne, if you'd like to share a bit on this.
Why do generation gaps? To me, I think I would rather like to use the term how we could bridge the generation gap, because I know that this generation gap thing has started even in my days, maybe in the 50s and 60s already, Yeah, there's somehow this big misunderstanding that when we are of different generation, we cannot communicate, But but I believe that as say if we really choose to accept each other, really choose to accept the fact that especially the older generation always expects to be respected by the young. They always say this, I eat more salt than this kind of thing. But I think we also need to respect them in return, because I think the key to better communication is respecting each other at the different stations of our life. Okay, so if we start with that, I have other points I said, like acceptance and all that. But if we start with the fact that, I recognize your age, I respect where you're coming from, and I want to listen to you too, and not lord over you, this kind of thing, it will be a good start to bridging the generation gap. Okay.
Thanks, Anne. Does Prof. Thang have anything to add on this in terms of reasons for why generation gaps exist, or why is it important to bridge these generation gaps?
Okay, can I say that when we talk about the word generation gap, sometimes people may ask, what is generation gap? Is it like if you are 15 years old talking to 25 years old, it's already a generation gap, right? So in fact, when we talk about the word generation, it could be more generally, we talk about it as like, the blood-related family kind of generations. That means very clearly like parent generation, grandparent generation, children generation, grandchildren generation, right? So basically the general term is like it's 20 years apart. Okay, so that's why when we talk about, because I'm also very much involved with intergenerational programs, when we talk about intergenerational programs, we basically want to talk about old and young, old in a sense of 20 years apart, that basically grandparent, but despite that, in intergenerational programs, we are actually much more concerned with bookends generation. That means the older generations, the grandparents, grandchildren, and older and young children. Yeah. So that's because we do feel that, okay, so in a sense, when you talk about generations, why is that generation gap in a sense? Because generations, according to the sociologist Manhai, he said that, he has this fresh context theory that say that, okay, a generation, young people, how do they learn values? How do they learn about, things in life? They learn it from the older generation, right? So that's the fresh context of the world in that sense. But so that's why we always talk about continuity, the important things. But now, because every generation will have to learn from their parents or grandparents, and then after that, they also add in their own things, right? So they will alter a little bit here and there. And then if the outside influence is stronger, like what we have today, then you will find more of a discontinuity. So in a sense, people will always say, young generations nowadays are not filial. They don't have filial piety ideas, not like we older generations. But actually, it's not like young generations don't have their ideas. I think they still do. They still want to respect. They still want to care for their parents. But because they're also much more influenced by individualism, for example, outside. So there's always a balance that every generations have to grapple with, and that can cause the discontinuity between the generations. So that's just a very broad sense of saying it. But when we talk about intergeneration, we're not talking about just multiple generation. Multiple generation is where, we all come together. We can coexist, but we may actually not interact with each other. So why I think it's very rightly so that GenLab talks so much about intergenerational bonding, because inter means that it's in between, right? So we want to look into how we connect with each other. So just bear in mind that, it's not just bringing people together and that's it. There are a lot of programs like that, right? They bring people together, okay, different generations, then we are multi-generations, but actually you're not connecting with each other because you are just coexisting side by side. So I think it's important that when we talk about intergenerational activities, we are really looking at ways to connect. And I think Anne has a lot of good ideas about how do you breach that connections.
I do agree with Prof regarding this communication from one generation to another. I think sometimes they don't know how to connect because the parents do not connect with their grandparents. So actually, as what I say, they learn from each generation. The values are passed down. For example, I used to tell my children, when I come home from work or something, you must say hi mom, hi dad, that's what we do, right? And then before we eat, we say grandma eat, grandpa eat, everybody eat. But when my children, that time was my children, they go to their friend's house, they don't do that, and then they come back and they question me, why mom must go and call everybody before we eat? They all just jump on the table and then they just eat, and some will just pick the food on their own and run off. I said, no, this is the value that we teach in this family. You have to follow. And they're like, not so happy about. So I think values have to be transmitted. And if they start talking to the elderly in a respectful way, they learn how to do this, then it's passed down. So sadly, sometimes, I don't say it's anybody's fault, but the fact is that we have both parents working. Myself, I also count two of us work, like we sometimes do not, bring about these values intentionally, to the next generation. And that's where the gap starts growing bigger.
Yeah, and that's good if it's a 3-generation family, because you don't have to say, but with what your actions you influence and let the younger generation know. But now the problem is, of course, most families are nuclear families.
Yeah.
So you do not have an example, to look at, to teach the younger generations.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for breaking this concept in terms of intergenerational bonding further. And as rightly you mentioned, it's not just about coexisting together, but it's really about how we mutually understand one another and really communicate with them. And yeah, like what you mentioned. And there are also finer lines. For example, it's intergenerational bonding is not just between like a very young person and a senior. But for example, let's say I'm 27 now. There's also some kind of intergenerational bonding involved when, let's say, I speak to a 12-year-old or 13-year-old as well. So just moving on, Prof. Thang, you have also done a lot of research in this area of intergenerational bonding and intergenerational research. So just wanted to ask, from your research, what are some interesting or surprising findings that you have come across? And perhaps could you share some examples of what other countries are doing to bridge generation gaps, which might be applicable for the Singapore's context, or maybe our audience here might be more interested to know more about as well?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about research, well, I'm anthropologist, so I'm really doing a lot of participant observation and not so much about figures, so I can't give you how many percent this, how many percent that. But in the general literature, in fact, the findings is a little bit mixed. So some studies will say there's impact, some studies think there's no impact in intergenerational programs, for example. Okay, and sometimes I think the not impact is really not because they don't want to connect, but sometimes because maybe there are other reasons that, other more objective reasons that cause that kind of a less impact. For example, a lot of programs, a lot of research looks at intergenerational programs that, like, let's say between dementia older persons and younger children. So it sometimes can be a little bit hard to do studies, right? Because your respondents may not be able to give very good feedback as well. But I did my research in Japan, in Koto, and this place that has, I spent a year there as a volunteer, and then researching on childcare center and elder care and like seniors home. So first floor is childcare, second floor seniors home, third floor is a nursing home. So older people always say, they go in seniors home, then they move out nursing home, then they're waiting to go upstairs, to heaven kind of thing. So but from that kind of setting, because they're very much into intergenerational bonding, they have like morning exercises together. They have sometimes programs like once a week, I think, that older people will join the children for the childcare programs for the whole day, so have meals together and so forth. So I think I could see very clearly the kind of impact that it has on the children. Not only just the children's parents as well, they also build relationship with the older people. And the interesting thing is that when older people comes in fact, people in they come into senior home, they are still mobile. They can take care of themselves. So the senior home second floor ones are the ones that actually interact more with the children. So a lot of people who come into seniors home, because they're not married. So that's why if somebody is staying alone, they're not married, then they don't really have that. They don't have the sense that I'm old person, right? Because it's like, my life is like that for the past 60 years. So I'm not old. I don't consider myself old person. So, but once this person comes into the center, right, because of children, the children will call you, hey, grandma, grandpa. Then suddenly this person say, hey, how come I become a grandma, grandpa? Like my identity changed. So sometimes when you first talk to them, they will say, I don't like children, because they have never had never had a chance to be with the children. But because my whole observation for a year, right? So I do see changes that's happening a long way with activities and so forth. Then we can say then I start to see, some of the older people, they are, especially older men, they're very quiet, right? They don't seems to interact much with other generations or with children, but they really take an interest in the children. So there's this older man who every day he will come down, like 3 or 4 o'clock, the children finish, and they'll be having a lot of playing, free play. And he will come down and play with the children, and then so he will really enjoy that. But he never say it, but we can see that he really enjoys it, and he make a point, because it's up to you whether you want to come and play with the children or not, and he will do that. So older people, like men, I felt that they kind of want to play with the children. Older women would tend to want to care for the children. They will not want to come down and help the children dress, change their clothes into pajamas when they go to the afternoon nap and all that. So it's very interesting kind of a gender kind of divide as well, but each enjoying or finding the satisfaction in terms of having this opportunity to be in touch with the children. So actually, when I came back from Japan, I wanted to promote this idea, but it's not easy, because in Singapore, this Japan example is because they all belong to one organization. So the childcare, the elder care are all from one organization. So they could be more concerted in the effort in trying to bridge the generations. But if you are childcare is one organization, elder care is one organization, it's not easy. And then also staff have to be trained, right? Staff will say, why do I want to do extra? I'm taking care of elderly, I don't want to know about children, or the children, childcare will say, I want to take care of the older people, children, I'm not interested with elder people. So it takes extra effort, but we can see it happening in Singapore today. You know, for example, St. Joseph Home, St. John's and Margaret's Village, they are all being very, very active in and enthusiastic in making this happen as well. Yeah, so I think I take up quite a bit of time. So just two more points about other countries. In Netherlands, you know, in Europe, a lot of people are living alone, right? Older people, and then they sometimes feel they're very unsafe to get out of the house. For example, in Netherlands, so there's this program, this program in the city center for older people that are living in the neighborhood to have programs with young people. So before that, older people don't want to get out of the house because they feel that it's so unsafe. You know, when you get out of the house, the young people are so rowdy. They cycle so fast or use the skateboard, you know, and so dangerous for me. So they don't want to get out of the house. But with this program, they're drawn out of the house to have interactions with the young people who, you know, who are riding bicycles. And in Netherlands, people all ride bicycles, right? So these old people, and they try to find ways of connections in terms of like this. A lot of the older men, especially, they're very good in actually repairing things, right? They repair bicycles and all that, right? So they use their skills as a way of communication. This program, so they would, you know, kind of help the young people with the bicycle repairs and talk to them and so forth. And as a result of that program, old people feel so much safer to come out of the house because they get to know the young people already. And they feel that when they come out of the house, they can, you know, also say hi to the young people in the neighborhood. So just very simple thing of making the opportunity happen to get to know each other. Then you will know that actually, you know, they're not so scary, right? Young people will say, hey, older people actually not so bad. They are very friendly. They want to talk to us. They can help us. You know, young people and older people say, oh, actually, young people are very nice. They are willing to support us. So it's really opportunities and relationship buildings that's important. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Those are indeed very interesting findings for all of us in the room as well. Perhaps the participants may also have some questions and we can dive in deeper into them through the Q&A segment. So I think in the interest of time, maybe we can move forward in terms of discussing or looking forward to you sharing more about, so how do we go about bridging these gaps? So what are some tips that you have for our audience in this room? So maybe, and could I ask, like, personally, what have you tried to bridge these gaps, for example, with your grandchildren or maybe even with the students in your school previously?
Okay, with my grandchildren, actually, I mean, I will play with that. I mean, usual as grandparents, you know, and many times, you know, they want to play hide and seek, they want to run around. And even though I'm very tired, I will make sure that I do it with them. You know what I mean? We have to establish that bonding. And the other thing I learned is even not only for your grandchildren, but even with your children, you know, because like I'm talking the case of, let's say, my mother-in-law. We used to invite her out, you know, but she said, tired, don't want to go, this and that. But I learned that, you know, after some time we get tired of inviting because it's like, you know, you always reject us, you know, so might as well don't do it. So I learned from her and I realized that no matter how tired or the food I don't like, where they want to go, you know, young people, the food is a bit different, I will still go, you know, because the fact that they are so kind enough to invite you into their company, you go, you know. I mean, you don't have to love everything they do, but I think in order to bridge that gap and to bring that closeness with the family, we just oblige. So similarly, you know, like you know, that we complain that why they always on social media and all that. But it is here to stay lah, social media. I mean, we have all the bad effects of social media, addiction and so on. But we can also learn. Like even my grandchildren can teach me, Grandma, come and play the what? Speaky squash or what, you know. Which taught me so much I don't know how to play. So we can also learn to play with them, even with social media. But of course, the addiction and all that we have to take into consideration. Okay, so that is one thing. Now with my JC student, I always enjoy teaching my students. They are the 18-year-olds, and so and a lot of counseling and so on. But in class, within the lecture, I try to learn their songs, and who they like, who are their favorites now, and so on. And I allow them to express themselves during class. My tutorial, if they have like 10 points for history, I taught history, they can do it in a rap, you know they just do it the style that they want, as long as it gets in here lah, rather than my talk. So I try to be more student centered than teacher centered. I give them a leeway to express themselves from their age group, so that they can relate. Because once the students can relate with you as a teacher, they will like your subject, they will learn, But once you say, old Mrs. Lee comes out, and then they like the young, sweet little, sweet, honestly, they like those pretty young teachers, not like old Mrs. Lee. But you still can bridge with them, because you learn what they like. And you share and you bring out examples in your lecture. Hey, teacher, you know Justin Bieber? I say, who say I don't know? That kind of thing. So you bridge that gap by learning. So we should actually learn from each other. That's why I say the key thing is we listen, and we learn from each other. And the other thing I want to emphasize is we actually cash in on each other's strengths and understand each other's weaknesses. For example, we will want to use the youth, the energy, their vibrance, their IT skills. And then for the seniors, we would like to maybe use learn from their experience, their so-called wisdom and understanding. And then for the young people and the stability, I think older people. And for the young people, we learn, we take into consideration some of their weaknesses. For example, impulsiveness, sometimes rebellious. This is part and parcel of being young and being very outspoken. And the older people, beware that we tend to be a little bit more inflexible, sometimes very negative, sometimes very naggy. So we must understand our strengths and weakness and then build on them for both generations. That's how we can bond. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your personal life experience. Really great on how you really take the effort, to really mingle with the younger generations.
Okay, just to add on, actually I had this volunteer work that I did all for myself with the elderly people, the one room flat people in block 26 Xinmin for 8 years. Okay, and also the older people, don't think that they are just old and then cannot do anything. You find out what they are interested in, and I found out that actually they love to sing. They love to sing. They may be old and frail physically, but they can sing. So we learn what is in them, and so I started learning all the Hokkien songs just to communicate with them, and they are very happy. And some of them are so lonely, they just need a hug. Every time I finish talking to them, they just wait, at the door to get a hug from me. So any generation can bond with each other.
Right. Aside to Prof. Thang, do you have any examples? Like, what have you tried with your own family members or with your children, for example?
Before that, I just want to, I really enjoy what Anne has shared. And I remember, I talk about Manheim, the sociologist, right, just now about, because he's one of those early generations of scholars who talk about generations. And he actually also gave a lot of attention to teachers and students, kind of teachers and pupils interaction, and reminding us that the teacher is not. It's not just that the teachers is educating the pupils, but it's also the pupils educating the teachers. So I think that's something that for as educator myself as well, it's something that we have to always keep in mind, especially from, I'm very privileged, I think, to be teaching at NUS, with young people, and learning from them all the time. And it's very, very useful, especially to help me to interact with my own two sons as well. So probably because of that, I do not feel like that much of a generation gap with my children, since there are a lot of things we can share, about school life and so forth. So I think it's really, really right for from Anne sharing that older people, now we're talking about intergeneration. Also, there's the old is very dynamic. Like it could be older, just a little bit older than, but we talk mostly of the older, like older adults. So in the sense, to be open up is very important. That we open up and to be willing to let younger people into our lives, I think is an important things to do. So it also involves making effort, like what Anne say, sometimes you oblige yourself. But really, if you think in terms of supporting older people, that's supporting younger people, I think that will make you perhaps, really feel that what you're doing is actually also very helpful towards that relationship building. So for example, it's not easy, especially if you're not living with your family. A nuclear family is not living with the grandchildren, grandparents. Right? It's harder for them to connect, in fact, because you do not have a lot of chance. Only sometimes weekends dinner together. And now with COVID, it's worse, right? Sometimes you don't even see your grandchildren, for a long time. But so my parents is in the 80s, so they. I'm very glad they decided to move next to me, like just 100 meters away. So we have a lot more chance to meet up. And so one of the things that my son used to, when they just started to drive, and then my elder son usually, want to borrow the car from from the grandparents. Okay, so that was a few years ago before they sold away the car. So they will always go. He will always go, and I would say, okay, you go and get a car key from Ama or Akong, and then he will also like go purposely. He will go and buy some kueh and buy some cakes and then bring over, right? So it becomes actually borrowing the car becomes a connection, because he has to see them, right, to get the car key, and then he will always buy things for them and then have small talks and all those. So I thought, it was a really good opportunity for them to bond, although they just even just making small talks and all that, but because of that necessity. But then after that, when it's like I think the car was like, the COE was for another 5 years. So after 15 years, my mother was the one that was driving, because my father had I think had too much alcohol and then was revoked of the license many years ago. So my mother said, yeah, I'm so old, I don't want to drive already. So I sold away the car. So I thought, it didn't occur to me, but then in retrospect, I realized it was really a chance lost. Because after that, then my son didn't have much of excuse, I would to say, to go, reason to go and to visit the grandparents. So I feel that actually we need to be a little bit more strategic as grandparents, if you are really opening up to and wanting to have more connections with grandchildren, then you have to find ways. So for grandmothers, maybe it's easier because you sometimes you make very good food, right? Then you just say, okay, come and eat, people will come, right? But grandfathers sometimes a bit difficult, because they already don't have a lot of deep connections quite often with their grandchildren. So when I was in my research and all that, when I talk to grandfathers, sometimes grandfathers say things like, what I do in building the connections is I drive my grandchildren around. That's what a lot of grandfathers do, right? You drive your grandchildren to tuition classes, swimming class and all this, and use this opportunity to talk, to interact, to build relationships. Yeah, so little, everyday things I think make a difference in terms of building that relationships. Yeah, I just want to bring an example of a friend, Dexter Thang. I don't know if people heard of him, but he's 80 81, 82 this year. And he's very interesting because he has this concept of relationship banking. So he thinks that relationship is so much more important, and it needs to like, it's like banking, you need to deposit, so that you can get profit out of, get interest out of it and so forth. So he makes an effort to talk to young people. On the street, he would like make friends with young people, talk to young people, and then invite them out for coffee and then talk, and then just build relationships, by chatting and becoming the significant other adult in the young people's life. So I thought that's very novel of him to do that. Not many of us, would like just go and talk to people on the street, right? and then trying to make friends. Yeah. So if we have more people that are willing to do that, just really be the first one to go out and reach out to people, I think that would really be very helpful. And the same for young people. If young people reach out to older people, in your neighborhood that you probably see every day, you just start to say hi, start with a simple hi, and you will realize that over time you're building a relationship, building the trust, and then you can support each other. Yeah.
Thank you so
I just
much.
want to just elaborate on what she said just Prof said about the banking, that Dexter guy. I think is very good because there's this banking, there's this accounting, where if you build a good relationship with them, I mean, not only just on a social basis, then when they have problems, then you are able to talk to them because they respect you, you see. You can't just, talk to another young person and try to give advice when you have not deposited to them some care and love for them. I feel that it's very important. You just can't. That's why sometimes parents I mean, we are so busy, we don't talk to our children, and then when it's time to school, we just go and tackle. They won't listen because where do you show your care? Where are you coming from? When you don't study, do you feel that it's just because you as a parent is embarrassed by my result, or do you actually care for my interest? But if we really deposit a lot of time and love to them, bank in all these things, they are willing to listen because they know where you're coming from.
Yeah. So just to add on this, Dexter, he, for example, he does have friends. I mean, we just call friends whatever age. And so there's this, so there are some young teenagers in the 16, 17, in that stage of like just entering poly and all those, and having a lot of problems and conflicts with their parents, really hating the parents, finding the parents expecting too much from them and so forth. And they really share with Dexter a lot about how they feel. And it's very important channel, I think, for the young people, because otherwise they may get depressed and they may feel that, they are really, they cannot meet up to their parents' expectations and so forth. So Dexter becomes a very good channel that, is able to listen. He listens to them and then giving, I mean, you don't have to give a lot of advice, but, listen to them and then listen from their objective and then try to reason with them and say, well, maybe the parents feel like that, as and how the parents actually what is the motive behind, when the parents is expecting so much and so forth. So we can see that kind of trust building up, and really it's like a mentoring process that really makes a difference to the young people when they grow, as they grow up and feeling all that turbulence, the conflicts with their parents. Yeah.
Thank you so much to our speakers today for sharing such interesting insights with us on this topic. So it's very nice to hear some of the tips for both youths and seniors alike as well. So as you guys were speaking, we also have our team who has been kindly helping us summarize some key pointers brought out at the sharing today. So maybe we can have them up first, as maybe I take some time to go through the questions which have come up in the chat and try to summarize them as well, if possible, if in the interest of time. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Chelsea, for sharing.
Yeah, actually, it would be nice also to hear people sharing about, the audience sharing about how you get to, what are your tips? I'm sure, you have a lot of your own tips and ways to bond with other generations as well.
Okay. All right. So I will just open some questions. Sorry, there were some technical issues earlier. Yep. So the team has condensed some summary of key pointers. So we will share that as a detailed guide to all our participants who will have joined the event later part also. Yeah. Okay. So one question that someone has is, what are some of the misconceptions that the younger generation has of the older generation, and what are some principles to create successful opportunities in Singapore for intergenerational interaction? Yeah. Yep. So maybe either Anne or Prof. Thang, you'd like to share a bit?
I think the misconceptions, that's why it's a misconception, If only we can really just remove this idea that there is such an issue that, the, 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 that the young have of the old, or vice versa, Yeah, because if we make up our mind that we will try to connect, and as I mentioned, looking at each other, accepting each other, there will not be a misconception. The point is, the misconception sometimes comes through the media, and the idea that, old people are frail, they are weak, they are boring, they are naggy, you know. Yeah. So that's what I mean, you see. But if we try to look into these matters and try to overlook them, we may just eliminate all the misconceptions. The old people look at the young as rude, no social etiquette, very rough, very rebellious. You see, these are all misconceptions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's most important that older generations, I think it would be good if older generations can make the first step out. Sometimes older generations also, do not. Actually, it's very amazing, right? How we go through, we were young once and then we forgot how it was
Exactly.
like young, right?
Yes.
Young people is like that, that kind of being more impulsive or it's just because before they go through life experience. So I think it will be good for really older generations to think back, and to be more acceptance of young people to begin with, so that we can open up that kind of the communication channel.
Yeah, I think one example is that I remember one of my generation friends say, "Hi, how come the young people today call us hi guys, hi guys?" They say, why no respect, But I said that's the way they talk. I don't think they mean any disrespect, but they use guys for every other person in this world lah. So guys, so it's not an issue of so as you say, we have to accept them. The other thing is, ayo, why they dress like that nowadays, holes all over the pants and all that. But I told her, remember when we were young, once when we were young, I mean, I used to belong to the hippie generation, and I wear clothes that my parents thought was weird, but it was fashionable at that time. So as you say rightfully, we must never forget where we came from. We were once like that. young, rebellious, hippie, whatever, you know. And now, because it's just different, the expressions of their clothes, their fashion, their talk is different. So we think that they are, you know, rude or what. It's not that. So that's why I said it's very important to respect each other's generation and accept it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the main thing, I mean, one of the things that come along, I mean, more now is really because people are growing older. So young people would also have maybe grandparents, great grandparents, and sometimes they have to be involved in caring. So sometimes I have students who, you know, whose grandmother had dementia, and she really hated old people because she said, you know, her grandmother is making her life very inconvenient because they're living together and all. But and that's really sad. But I think it also means that the sense of the relationship building have to start much younger, so that, you know, you build up that love and trust a long time, that when the old person becomes frail, the young persons are able to accept it and willing to, you know, spend time and really giving the love for the old. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, I think we just have time for maybe one more question, because I think both of your sharing have summarized some of your responses to some of the questions asked as well. Okay, so another question is, before we maybe call it a wrap up for this segment, what is the greatest challenge faced by stakeholders in bridging generation gaps? What are some workarounds that you recommend, or solutions, for example? So maybe we can talk a bit about what is the biggest barrier or challenge that we actually face, or what are some workarounds or maybe some solutions that we can consider.
Okay, can I just say about the because I talk about the age integrated centers, right? Like have childcare centers co-locating with older nursing homes and so forth. So I remember, so one of the biggest challenge this kind of centers have is parents are the one who say that, you know, it's so the old people will bring disease to the young people, you know. So, and old people are so frail, you know, they are not, it's not safe, you know, for children as well, because children are running over. So this is actually one of the biggest barriers that many of them would face, that the operators would face. But in fact, if you look at those places that are operating it, you can see that actually young people will learn. They will learn that, oh, with older people around, they have to walk a bit slowly. They have to be careful of them, because they get a chance to know that they have to learn and change their behavior as well. Yeah. So, and also the fun, you know, the old people, for example, in the childcare, daycare, I mean, NTUC has done a very good job, you know, having some of good interactions of the daycare elders with the childcare children. So daycare elders, you know, if you observe the kind of, when they have activities and the kind of interaction, is very interesting of how older people see themselves as, you know, carer. They want to care for the young children, you know. But at the same time, young children, so in those activities, we observe that, you know, young children are very happy to want to go to, you know, join the program, to go over to the elder care center. So when you ask, so once it was like, you ask this younger, why are you looking forward to the, you know, to the intergenerational program? And her answer was, oh, because I make grandma smiles. So we always think that, you know, we didn't feel that young children also feel the value of it, because they feel that they are also useful, you know, being able to play a role in that sense of making other people happy. And I think that's something that they will learn along the way of, you know, how to interact with people, and how do you really, you know, foster that kind of a happy relationship. Yeah. So so I hope that we will be able to educate parents more in terms of the goodness of bringing generations together.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on some of the key questions that our participants have. So we have actually come to the end of the segment, and we have to wrap this segment up because we have our next segment, Human Library, happening at 11 a.m. So thank you once again so much, Prof. Thang and Anne, for sharing your useful and interesting insights on intergenerational bonding and some action tips which we can take to better bridge these gaps. So for the rest of you, if you guys still have some questions, you all can actually share through our feedback form as well. So you can actually scan the QR code, but if you guys are attending other segments, like the Human Library or the 2 p.m. segment on emotional resilience talk, you can fill in this feedback form at once after you have attended all the segments. So for those who are just only attending the intergenerational dialogue, you can scan this QR code, and the link has been also popped into the chat box, and we would actually appreciate your feedback. All right, so Prof. Thang and Anne, do you have any final comments to share before we head on to the Human Library segment at 11 a.m.?
I think I enjoyed listening to Prof and some of the interesting suggestions. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned a lot from you, and I really appreciate GenLab, Katana, for really making such opportunities available.
Yeah. And one of the ways in which you were saying the government is that they should actually enhance the work of GenLab, because you have hit the nail on the head. That is the intergenerational bonding, really, because without bonding, we cannot do anything, right? I mean, we can put all of them in homes, in kindergartens, but we are all separated. And you know, unity is the key to a society.
Right, and remembering that society is made up of all generations.
Yes. And we have to consider now we have a big group of older people who live longer and are educated.
Yes.
That is a big thing to do, to consider. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So just thank you for those who have attended our dialogue segment today. And if you are joining us for the Human Library, and for those who have signed up for the Human Library, please stay on in the same meeting room. So we'll be using the same link, and we will have a short break before we come in back again at 11 a.m. sharp for the Human Library. So I think our sharers for the Human Library are also have joined us, and Anne will also be one of our sharers for the Human Library segment. Yeah, so you guys, those who are staying on for the Human Library, feel free to take a short break. And as mentioned earlier, the team will be sending you a detailed guide of the points raised up at this dialogue segment to your email. Yeah. Thank you. And yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.